For a closer look, we're joined now by Juliette Kayyem, a former assistant secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. She's now at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Juliette, it's great to have you here. So, historically, presidents, as we just heard, they federalized the National Guard at a governor's request during a time of crises, like after Hurricane Katrina, or to enforce court orders, as was the case in Little Rock back in 1957, to enforce integration. What happened over the weekend is without precedent. The president deploying the Guard over the governor's objection. What are the implications?
Well, they are huge. I mean, there's not only no precedent to this. There's no sort of check on it. We don't know if this is the standard. If what happened in LA is the standard now for federalizing the National Guard and deployment of active military, the Trump administration has so lowered the floor and the distinction between civil and military actions that they appear now to be one and the same. It's important to remember there's two distinct issues here, and I'm not even going to talk about immigration. The first is, what are the standards for deployment of a federalized National Guard? To just put it in context, the last time this was done, as you said, in both instances, the governors wanted it, was 1992, the LA riots. By the time that they were called, over 60 people had been killed in a city that was literally on fire everywhere throughout Los Angeles. And then again in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina response. By then, 1,400 Americans were dead. There is protest. There is violent protest in LA. There are cars on fire. There's name calling. There's agitation. But there is nothing that satisfies the standards that we saw in 92 and 2005. The second thing I want to say is the deployment of active military into a very complicated web of first responders who are training and working together all the time is not always beneficial. And there's a lot of challenges in terms of the introduction of a militarized force into a civilian law enforcement, firefighters, emergency managers. And in the past, it has not worked very well.
I want to ask you more about the Marine deployment in a moment. But first, for the National Guard, practically, does the National Guard operate differently, whether it's under state or federal leadership? I mean, what does that mean for command and control?
Yeah, so the National Guard is, just think of it as dual-hatted. So the same person. I'm in the National Guard. So under state National Guard, I report to my governor. The president, as he did on Saturday, then could federalize me essentially under Title X. I now report to any command that president is going to give me, regardless of what I've been trained to, my understanding of the community, my integration into the community. That's the beauty of state National Guards, is that they're us. I mean, they're here. They're not off at some camp in another state. They understand the communities. They understand the geography. So, for example, in 1992 with the LA riots, the state National Guard were also deployed. That was viewed as pretty successful, although delayed and complicated. They did things like help with traffic control, protect buildings, as we're talking about, support law enforcement in terms of just giving them sort of a little bit of bandwidth, given where the riots were. They help protect shopping malls. That's the kind of thing that you want your sort of your local military asset to do. Under the president, they can do almost anything under Title X, except under the Posse Comitatus Act. They cannot serve in a law enforcement function. In other words, ICE would still need to come in and deport people. But unless you've trained for that, unless you know what the rules of engagement are, I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in the military understanding that distinction under this president.
Well, late today, we learned that 700 Marines in California from the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines at 29 Palms, they've been ordered to assist in Los Angeles. They're expected to arrive within 24 hours. The big question now, among many, is whether President Trump will invoke the Insurrection Act, which would give these troops the ability to directly participate in civil law enforcement. And this was the thing, Juliette, as you well know, that many Trump officials during the first term were pushing back against, because it sets up potentially volatile interactions between U.S. troops and civilians on U.S. soil. What questions does this raise?
That is not. They also U.S. troops against first responders. I mean, look, if people want to complain about the rioters or the paid rioters or the outside agitators, sure. We will now have active military on the streets with a mission we don't know, under legal authority that has not yet been invoked yet, with no training, no communication capacity with the other first responders, and no clear chain of command that integrates into what's already been built. And and let's just, I want to say this again, and out in the street, operationally not necessary. I mean, we're not at the kind of crisis that the president and Secretary Hegseth and Homan, who talked about sort of essentially mean language towards ICE officials. So this is a second shoe to drop within 48 hours. And I will say we have never seen this before. I don't care what you think about immigration or immigration enforcement. This is a different play, and the floor has fallen if President Trump does this.
Juliette Kayyem, thank you for your time and for your perspectives this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you.